You might want to make a few notes on this. I've been asked to talk to you about blood pressure and what is high blood pressure and what is low blood pressure. And you might have noticed that when you go to get your blood pressure taken, you can have it done electronically. Some of you have been playing around with that in the break and having it done electronically. Or there's a device that some doctors use which you can also be used. And the electronic way is not quite so good, I have to say. It's not quite so accurate, so just bear that in mind. And this is what we call a normal blood pressure. 120/80. And 120 refers to what they call systolic pressure. That's pressure in the blood in the artery, the aorta. And the figure at the bottom, 80, it refers to diastolic pressure, which is pressure as the ventricle relaxes. It's in between beats in the ventricle, one of the lower chambers. So basically you get two readings. 120/80 is considered normal. So if either of these figures go above that, that's considered to be high, but generally it has to be quite far above for it to be high. So if this one went up to, 125, that doesn't mean to say you've got high blood pressure. If this one went up to, 85 or 90, that doesn't mean you've got high blood pressure. Also, if they go down, that's considered low blood pressure, but they have to go really far down for it to be problematic. And my blood pressure, if I write it next to it, I took this about 2 weeks ago while I was sitting down. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening, and I have got low blood pressure. And my blood pressure was 109/59. Now that's actually a little bit of a problem. And one of the reasons it's low is I used to do a lot of exercise. And because of that, I lost some weight. And we're going to look at what causes high blood pressure to start with. Obesity, being overweight, can increase blood pressure. And my blood pressure was probably higher, actually, when I was younger, but I was overweight. Because generally, as we age, our blood pressure goes up. And that's because the arteries become less mobile, they become more rigid, so they become stiffer. So causes of high blood pressure: smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, if you take in too much salt or too much alcohol, certain disorders of the kidneys, because kidneys are to do with, they help regulate fluid retention and the volume of fluid in your blood. Certain drugs will alter your blood pressure. And of course, stress. Have you heard of that? If you're stressed, your muscles become very tense and the blood pressure goes up. So why is it that, for example, stress will increase blood pressure, exercise will lower it, generally? If you exercise, you get something called capillarization. What are capillaries? They're tiny little vessels, that's right. Your body will build extra blood vessels. So think of this analogy. If you have a system of roads in a town and you have 1,000 cars in that town, at some points there's going to be some congestion, isn't there? So you've got 1,000 cars which represent the blood and they're all driving around in this town. But if someone comes along and builds some new roads, maybe some going outside the town, one big one going through the town, would you agree that the pressure will go down in some of the roads, given if there's the same number of cars? If you still keep 1,000 cars, that pressure's going to go down. And it's the same, with the same volume of blood. If you build extra blood vessels, the pressure in every vessel's going to go down. And that's what happens when you exercise, because your body forms capillarization. It will form brand new capillaries, because muscles, what do they need to work in addition to food, like glucose? They're going to need oxygen. How's it going to get there? What is it that carries the oxygen? The red blood cells. So they've got to get there somehow. So the body's very clever and it builds new blood cells. When you're stressed, the opposite thing happens to some extent. You don't necessarily lose your capillaries, But the muscles that the capillaries run through become very tense. There's an increase in tone. They stay contracted, so they squash off some of the blood supply. So if you go back to your analogy of the roads, imagine you've got this town and you've got a certain amount of roads, you've got 1,000 cars which represent, the blood flow. If you then do some roadworks and you block off some of those roads, the pressure's going to go up, isn't it? Because some of them are blocked off by roadworks. And that's what happens with stress. You block off some of the blood. And have you noticed when you massage someone that's very stressed, if they've got tight muscles, what colour do the muscles go? If you squeeze them and knead them, you do petrissage, open-handed kneading, what do? They go red. Why do they go red? Because the blood's gone back in. So you've maybe done a little bit of mechanical movement. You've actually pumped in some of the blood there to where it ought to be. So massage is great because it helps lower blood pressure, because it pushes blood into maybe some of those capillaries where it's not been going. It helps the muscles relax so the blood can go in. So generally, it'll lower blood pressure. And that's one of the reasons why if you've got low blood pressure over here, you can be normal. My family's actually got very high blood pressure in all of my family. My mother, my father, all of my relatives have got high blood pressure. So although mine is low, it's certainly not normal for me in my family. If you've got a client who's got low blood pressure, you need to be quite careful when you're massaging them so that when they get off the couch, they don't get dizzy, because it's going to go down even more. And some of the problems associated with very low blood pressure are that if you stand for long periods of time, you get blood pooling, you can get dizzy. If you go from a standing to a sitting or a low position, or you come up again, you can get very dizzy. And that doesn't happen to me so much now because I don't exercise as much. But if I go back to exercise, which I will do, I'll certainly start to experience that again. And of course, when you take your blood pressure, we'll alter it. So generally, if you go to the doctor and you're feeling a bit anxious about something and you think you might have a problem and they take your blood pressure, it might be a bit higher because you're a bit stressed. So generally you get a slightly higher reading. But do bear in mind, if you were taking your blood pressure with that electronic monitor, it's not as accurate as some of the other monitors that can be used. So a general kind of overview of high and low blood pressure. Do you know anyone that's got high blood pressure? Any of you know anyone? Have any of you got low blood pressure? You've got low blood pressure. Do you have any problems with having low blood pressure?
I thought it's the opposite, like stress. When I had a really stressed when I was working, and the doctor said because of the stress, my pressure was so low, like 50 and like that.
So even lower than this?
Yeah.
Wow. Did you get headaches? Did you feel dizzy? What happened?
I was normal, but I was okay. But when we checked my...
It was very low.
Yeah,
okay.
The doctor was really surprised. And how did you get here? And by bicycle? And
wow.
Really?
Yeah, so we were saying before the break that if it's very low, you can feel quite unwell. In some countries, they'll give you medication for low blood pressure, but we tend not to do that in the United Kingdom. But in some countries, they do medicate for low blood pressure. And you can have medication for high blood pressure. But have you heard of what generally is being prescribed now for high blood pressure? What do doctors generally say if they can avoid giving out drugs? What might lower it? Sorry? A glass of red wine. Oh, well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? Can you get that on the health service? Yes, exercise, that's right. So they tend to encourage exercise. And it's quite interesting because I was a fitness instructor for many, many years. And I worked with people that were quite overweight and with some obese clients. And one of the problems is that if they've got very high blood pressure, when you're actually exercising, what happens to the blood pressure when you're actually doing it? It's going to go up, isn't it? So you've got to be a little bit cautious because it is going to go up. So you have to do very graded exercise. But generally, it's really good for people generally who are overweight because it will help to lower their blood pressure. And you can usually inherit your blood pressure, just like our eye colour, our hair colour, our skin colour, the kind of the makeup of our tissues, whether we have hypermobile joints or not. What was hypermobility? What was that? Extra extension, extra flexibility, bendy bunnies. Some of you have looked at that by looking at your elbows and the back of your knees to see whether they will go beyond the normal range. That's something you inherit. It's the makeup of your tissues. And blood pressure is the same. You can inherit that.